hour today, but we wanted to talk about some special issues that may come up with your teens and preteens. Let's talk about dealing with extracurricular activities. You know, when our kids hit this age, when they get to become preteens and teenagers, they're interested in doing a lot of stuff. You know, they're interested in theater, and they're interested in music, and they're interested in sports, and they're interested in whatever, okay? Lots of stuff. And there's a lot of good things that can come from these activities. You know, these can be very positive activities for our kids. You know, they can learn how to get along with other people while they're doing these things, to become part of a team, you know, for character issues like determination and perseverance. And, you know, there's a lot of good things that can come out of these activities, lots of good things. However, in our current culture, these extracurricular activities have become an obsession for some people, okay? And it takes precedence over family life. It takes precedence over schoolwork. It definitely takes precedence over pursuing a relationship with God, even in Christian households, even in some Christian households. Remember Luke 14:33. Any of you who does not give up everything he has cannot be my disciple. You know, the fact is, Jesus is not going to play second fiddle to baseball or ballet or theater or whatever, okay? And if, as Christian parents, if our deepest heart desire is for our kids to pursue a relationship with God at some point, we've got to put some limits on these things. And we can't jump in the cultural boat of, you know, if my kid is not playing on the travel ball team every Sunday, where, you know, it's not, you know, it's not a good thing. You know, no, you know, your kid needs to be in church on Sunday for as long as they are willing to do that. You know, we've got to get some sense about this. You know, our kids, we had 3 kids, and they were busy kids, and they had lots of interests. We did softball, and we did taekwondo, and we did musical theater, and we did dance, and we did all of that stuff, but we always kept it where it did not dictate our family life. We still had dinners together as families. I mean, we could adjust a little bit. You know, somebody's rehearsal is going to run until 6:30. We'll eat dinner at 7. You know, we could adjust a little bit, but we never let any of those activities dictate our family life to us. We also never let any of those activities keep our children from church activities. You know, our kids were interested in church. We were blessed that we had teens that were interested in coming to church. And so, you know, we tried to help them, you know, choose an activity that didn't interfere with church, or if it was on a church night, you know, we went into the dance studio and said it's time for us to go to church. And we talked to the coaches and the instructors about this beforehand, you know, that we go to church on Wednesday night at this time. They can stay at rehearsal until this long. Now, I'll be honest with you, you know, our kids lost theater roles because of that. We were not the most popular parents on the team by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, there were some negative consequences to that. You know, the positive consequences were that when our children got interested in studying the Bible, they had to choose. They knew they had to choose between God and that other thing they loved. And we spent hours talking about that. That was counting the cost for our teenagers. Which we all have to do. We all have to count the cost. So, you know what I'm saying? Don't let this become such an obsession like our culture is, that it overrules what's really important for our kids. You know, if your kid is if your kid is interested in an activity that is obviously detrimental to them, you may need to have to step in as a parent and stop that activity for the kid, and it may not be popular. You know, our son, when he got to high school, he decided he wasn't interested in taekwondo anymore, that he wanted to letter in a sport in high school. And so he got on the wrestling team. And he went into the wrestling team, probably weighing about 130 pounds at that time. There was a slot on the team that opened up at 105. And they decided that he would take that 105 slot on the wrestling team. So he's doing 2-a-day practices. He's starving himself. He went down academically. Like I said, this wasn't the best academic time for him anyway. He was miserable to live with at home, which he had never been before. He had always been a very pleasant kid. he was a disciple at the time, and we could tell that it was really affecting him spiritually. And Michael got with Sam Lang one night, who will be here tomorrow, and Sam said, you really are going to have to pull him from the wrestling team. Now, at this point, this boy was all about wrestling, all right? He was, he wasn't super talented at it, but he loved it. He was all about the wrestling team, Luckily, we had kept this rule of you won't miss church, So he had gone to a team midweek at the same time that Michael was getting with Sam. And so we're riding home in the car, and we're just dreading this conversation with this boy, that we're going to have to tell him he's got to quit the team. We walk into the kitchen, and he's standing in the kitchen, and he's crying and eating, by the way, crying and eating. And he said, I went to the teen class tonight, and they did a class on heaven and hell. And he said, I love wrestling, but it's not worth going to hell over. And so I'm quitting the team tomorrow night. Now, I don't think that would have happened if he hadn't heard that lesson in church, which I don't know what got to him. But we were, of course, so grateful to God that he had made this decision on his own, But he actually got persecuted after that by the wrestlers, the other wrestlers. He got persecuted for that decision. But you know what I'm saying? You can't let your kid go down spiritually and emotionally and physically over one of these extracurricular activities. The fact is most of our kids are not going to play for the NBA. They're not, all right? Most of our kids are not going to be prima ballerinas for the New York City Ballet. They're not. It's just a hobby. It's just a hobby. Now, if you have a kid that is very talented in one of these areas, you've got to get some wise people around you to give you great advice about how to balance this, okay? If you've got a kid that may play for the NBA one day, God bless you. You better find some people that know a lot about that can give you very wise guidance as to how to guide your child and protect your child while they're using this talent that they've been given.
I'm sorry, Mary, in the interest of time, was cutting out some points, so I wasn't doing a good job of keeping up on the slides. Last piece of advice, don't live vicariously through your child, which a lot of parents do, especially when they have football stars or, really talented boys or girls in sports. Well, then you're just inserting your own hopes and dreams and wishes instead of the good of your child. I also wanted to look back at this one. It says, prior to high school, missing church is not an option. Drop activities that interfere with spiritual growth. I have strong convictions about this. As long as your child is small and can be put in a car, usually little kids love church anyway. They love Kingdom Kids and whatever your church's program is. They love it. In teenagerhood, if a child is resistant to going to church, they're no longer small enough that you can pack them up in the car and force them to go whether they want to or not. Sometimes, if you try to do that and you insist on your teenager going to church, it will blow up in your face because they'll just dig in your heels, and then they'll use that as a weapon against you in their future and say, my parents made me go to church when I was in high school. They're making me go to church. So you can throw stones at me or throw me out of the building as you see fit. But I've just seen too many times where parents trying to force their teenagers to go to church, blowing up in their face. Now, that's not permission for the teen to do whatever he wants while you're at church. So it's very sound to put parameters on, okay, you don't want to go to church anymore, I'm not going to make you. Your relationship with God is up to you. We've done everything we can to teach you the correct path. But if you choose not to go to church, we can't force you to do that anymore. However, while you're here, no computer, no TV, you're doing homework, you're doing some quiet activity. It's certainly reasonable to put restrictions on what they do while they're not with you at church. I'm just saying, if you try to force the issue, sometimes teenagers will dig in their heels and they'll use that as justification for why they always hated church, because my parents made me go. Now, let's talk about another big kahuna, TV, video games, social media. For a really good lesson on this, I would recommend this reference. Dave Pachta, who some of you know, when it was time for the REACH conference in 2016, came up with this presentation, The I Family, which turned out to be really, really good. Not just because I was asked to contribute to it, but he came up with this amazing discourse on the damage of social media and what to do about it. So instead of me wasting my time, my breath trying to replicate it, I refer you to this. So he did most of it. I was asked to come talk a little bit about how video games and so forth affect kids neurologically. And then Elizabeth Lang Thompson came up and talked about, from a very practical level, how they were working things out with their kids. So very good presentation, if I do say so myself. Meanwhile, let's start with TV and movies, which it seems to be getting less and less. When we see new kids in the office, we always do a clinical interview, and part of that clinical interview is, what do you like to watch on TV? I've noticed recently in the last few years, kids saying more and more, I don't watch that much TV. It seems to be going by the wayside. Why? Because they have access to what? The phone, the internet, so they're watching YouTube, they're watching videos, a lot of which are not good. So this TV and movie thing seems to be a little bit fading away. However, I can tell you, when our kids were little, we would watch things together as a family. We'd watch the movies together. Now, if the kids were interested in a show, we'd watch it together as a family, even though it did not interest me or Mary in the least. We sat down and we watched it together because it gave us an opportunity when they were young to teach them the word inappropriate. So we would watch some TV shows and say, that's inappropriate. When we're watching, what was it, Saved by the Bell. It's inappropriate for a student to talk back to the teacher like he just did. So it was a learning experience when they were little, and they couldn't argue about it, right? Now, as the kids grew older, we purposefully watched, and you may not like this and not believe in doing this in your home, which is fine, but we would watch some things that were clearly inappropriate. For example, do you remember this teen soap opera, One Tree Hill? One Tree Hill, anybody? Yeah, so a few nodding heads. There was this thing when our kids were teens, and they're now in their 30s, One Tree Hill was just a teen soap opera. So once again, we weren't interested in it to begin with, but as we watched it together as a family, I got kind of hooked, I have to admit. What it gave us the opportunity to do was watch the show together, and it was all this teen drama. We'd turn off the show, and then we'd debrief each other about it. So that was a good episode. Do you really think, though, that in the real world, you can be unfaithful to your boyfriend and still go happy, blithely along your way like that? Do you really believe you can go through a teen pregnancy and still be independent and financially independent? I mean, it gave us teaching opportunities. You see what I'm saying? So within the limits of your tolerance, you can watch some inappropriate things and make them into teaching lessons. That's what we did. But at the very least, Christians should accept the low bar established by our own media companies. You know how now, when you watch something on TV, they have ratings, right? With a whole bunch of initials. This is rated MATLVQRS. You know, it's all, I don't understand what they are, but they're all written right there. The world sets a very low bar for those ratings. The least we can do as Christians is know what those ratings are and abide by them. That's the least we can do. Thank goodness that companies are putting those ratings on there. Now, one rule we were always adamant about was no TVs or computers in the kids' rooms. Now, I realize that's getting harder now because of tablets and portable devices, but when our kids were little, no TV. Now, we see way too many families in the office where every kid has a TV in their room because it's an easy thing to do. You kids are driving me crazy. Just go to your room and watch TV. We don't think that's the best way to deal with it. Our plan was we had only one TV, and it was where everyone could see it, and everyone, took a turn watching something. Mostly our kids liked watching the same things, but sometimes you had to take turns. Now, what adult was interested in watching SpongeBob? Well, me, I confess, but most normal adults weren't. So, if we're going to stick to this one TV in the household rule, sometimes we as the parents are going to have to be mature and take the high road and let the kids watch something under our supervision that we might not like. Well, that gives us an opportunity to do something else, like use one of those leafy, papery things. Books, that's what they are. To read a book, if we have to take a turn. So that was just a general principle about TV and movies. Now, let's go on to video games. I know you can't read that slide, and I tried 9 Ways to Sunday how to get it into readable form, and I couldn't do it. But here's some research. This is from a worksheet we hand out to the parents in our office about video game play. And it has some alarming information and statistics. Most teenage boys, for example, spend more than 13 hours per week playing video games, while teen girls average 5 hours per week. Research has shown that time spent in video game play interferes with other more positive activities, like interacting with the family, friends, active play, reading, and so forth. Therefore, it's recommended that parents restrict video game play to a maximum of 30 minutes per day. And when we present this in the office to parents and they present it to their kids, it is no end of rebellion to begin with. But once they learn how to conform to that 30 minutes a day, it's a rule that can be adhered to. A series of studies over the past 10 years shows that the more time your child spends playing video games, the less likely they are to do well at school. It's a fact, and I'm saying this as a neuropsychologist, that video game play improves a couple of things, like eye-hand coordination. However, it's also been shown that that improvement doesn't generalize to once you're out of the video game, it doesn't generalize to other activities. In other words, kids can get faster with eye-hand coordination on video games, but it doesn't make them faster with eye-hand coordination playing baseball or tennis or building something. I do a lot of neuropsychological evaluations in my office of college-age men and women. I have a contract with the University of Georgia where I evaluate their athletes, student athletes. And I've noticed an interesting thing. I do one test of gross motor strength and one test of fine motor speed. I've noticed over the past few years that even the athletes, they're getting lower scores on the tests of gross motor strength and better scores on the tests of speed because they play video games and get less exercise. So now I'm explaining it in my reports as a typical video game profile of someone who's faster with their fingers but weaker and slower with everything else. I won't belabor you with the rest. Except the issues of violence. Remember when I said that psychological research changes from year to year? There's only one finding in psychology that I know of that has been consistent across the decades, and has never been disproven, and that's exposure to violence makes kids more violent. Now, there used to be this theory that if you expose kids to violence, like through watching it in a TV show or a video game, it would make them less violent because they've already expressed their violence vicariously through the game. Research has never supported that. The research has always said that exposure to violence makes kids more violent. There's a neurological system in your brain called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons, they think, enabled us, when we were cavemen, to learn through the experiences of other humans, What mirror neurons are, even if you're not doing an activity, when you're watching an activity, mirror neurons cause the same reactions in your brain as if you were doing it. You see what I'm saying? So playing a violent video game, even though you're not stabbing anyone with a spear, your brain has the same reactions to it. So violence begets violence in video games. Now, it drives me crazy to hear little kids come in and when I ask them what they like to do and they talk about video games. The ones that are acceptable to me are racing games and sports games, and even those we restrict to the 30 minutes a day. Violent video games do some of these terrible things. You have to watch these games and see, is the aggressive behavior in a video game rewarded in any way? Well, yes. The more of these guys I kill, the more of these points I get. Is the harm portrayed as humorous? Oh yeah, there's plenty of games where, there's one called, my nephews used to play it, called Berserk. It's just a game where you do funny, torture-y things. You know, you blow stuff up, you kill things, and it's supposed to be funny. Are realistic consequences of violence absent from the game? Yes. What happens when you get killed in a video game? You start over and you get another life. Up to infinite numbers of lives, I suppose. Is that a realistic consequence? So you see what I'm saying? How video games, violent video games, mess people up. So, what you need to do is know what the kids are playing. Here's some websites that you can look up. You can actually get on this website, and you look up the name of the game, and it will tell you what the theme is of the game, what it's about, and what's happening in the game. What bothers me and really worries me is parents coming into the office, and I've interviewed the child, and they say they play this game or that game or that game, and I'm like, I can't believe it. And I'll say to the parents, you know he's playing this game? The one I like to pick on the most is Grand Theft Auto. You've heard of, right? Grand Theft Auto now in its 5th edition. I'm telling you the truth. Not long ago, I had a 5-year-old come into my office, and when I asked him what he likes to do, he said, play Grand Theft Auto. And I said, do you even know what that game is about? And you know what this 5-year-old said to me? Yes, I hire a prostitute. So here I am with my mind exploded, my brain's all over the walls of my office because my mind just exploded, and I went out to the parent and I said, do you know what your kid is playing? And I said, do you know he plays Grand Theft Auto? And she said, yeah. I said, do you know what it's about? And she said, no. His dad bought it for him, or it was his big brothers or something like that. The parent didn't even know what it's about. I wish I could tell you that's only happened once, but it happens repeatedly every week. So I urge parents, you've got to know what the kids are playing and what's happening in it, and then restrict it. So if people, my two are Grand Theft Auto and Call of Duty. I tell parents, you take those, go home, take those, crush them under the heel of your boot or under your car, and if your kid objects, too bad. These are not appropriate games for all these reasons that I explained here. And once again, the only good thing about video games and TV is they give you something to take away.
Yeah, we're on a soapbox about this because, usually when we teach about spanking, we get the question, doesn't spanking make our kids aggressive and violent? This is what's making our kids aggressive and violent, okay? Like Michael said, we've got 50 plus years of research that has consistently said that exposing our kids to these violent images, these violent media, makes them more violent and aggressive, And as a society, we are ignoring this. We're totally and completely ignoring this. This is what is making our kids violent and aggressive, is this stuff. So we've really got to be careful with it. So let me move off of that, and let's talk about another issue, setting family rules about dress and modesty. I think this is a bigger issue with our daughters than it is with our sons. I know some boys struggle with this, but I think in general, it's a bigger thing with our girls. If you have never taken a teenage girl shopping in a teen girl department, you have no clue what they're up against. All right? If you're a dad and you have not done this, you and your wife on a date sometime go into the teen girl department and try to find a decent outfit for your girls to wear. It is almost impossible. It's almost impossible. And our girls, of course, are affected by this. They're affected by the images they see in the magazines and on TV and on the internet and all those kind of things. Then they go to the store and they're trying to pick out an outfit, and there may not be an outfit that's appropriate. I took a bunch of teen girls, and one crazy time in our life a few years ago, we ended up leading the teens. No one knew why, but we did. And so I took, Sam and Jerry made us, they said, you can start on Wednesday. And we're like, we don't like teens. And they said, you start on Wednesday anyway, So anyway, we led the teens for a number of years. And I took, 5 or 6 of the girls were getting ready to go to a homecoming dance. So we go into a big mall in Atlanta, and we're trying to find appropriate dresses for these little girls to wear to homecoming. We were there all day long, all day long. We ended up coming back and sewing lace up here and lace at the bottom of the skirt because everything was immodest. Everything was immodest. And of course, these little girls wanted to go to their homecoming dance and look great, you know? And they were disciples. These kids were all disciples. They wanted to be modest. But that's how hard it is, you know? So know what you're up against. You know, one thing as parents we need to do is we need to teach our kids that they are beautiful just the way God made them. Whatever size they are, whatever color their hair is, whatever color their eyes are, whatever color their skin is, God made them that way, special for a reason, and we need to teach them that they are beautiful just that way, all right? Our girls all don't need to look like supermodels. Even the supermodels don't look like supermodels, by the way, all right? You know, our boys don't all need to look like professional athletes, and we need to teach our kids that's an unrealistic standard, what you're seeing. You know, those supermodels are starving themselves, and then when they get to the photo shoot, they still airbrush stuff out before they take the picture. That's not what people really look like, all right? People really look like we look, all right? All different sizes, all different colors, all different shapes. That's how God makes people. And we need to teach our kids that that is what is normal, and that is what is good, all right? You know, with our girls, help them learn how to dress attractively but modestly. That's going to take some time and effort on your part, Mom, probably. It's going to be you helping them shop. Dad, that's going to mean you're going to have to write a check every now and then or send a credit card to the mall, okay? You know, you cannot, you know, it may take a little money to help your girls get a beautiful prom dress that they feel great about, but that is modest and appropriate. Write the check, all right, send the credit card. It's in the long run, it's going to pay off so much more. You know, the other thing I think we need to teach our kids is what immodest dress, what kind of negative consequences immodest dress causes. You know, that people look at you, they devalue you as a person. You know, you may be an object of lust for someone if you dress this way. You know, a lot of our little girls, a lot of our teen and preteen girls, you know, they want the attention. Of course they want the attention from people. They don't realize that the attention they're getting a lot of times is negative. It's not positive. It's negative attention that they're getting, and we need to teach them that. The other thing is we need to make modesty and not style the issue, okay? We all have a certain style, and we all would like our kids to dress a certain way. I have 2 girls. My oldest girl and I could work out of the same closet. I mean, we like the same kind of things. You know, she comes in my closet a lot of times and oh, I love that shirt. And, you know, I'd end up, oh, well, just keep that shirt. You know, I lose a lot of clothes to her. You know, it looks better on you anyway. Just keep the shirt, you know. My youngest daughter, some of you guys have run across her, the more she looks like Bob Marley, the happier she is, all right? And that has always been Emily. You know, now she's the coolest person in our family by a long shot, all right? But her style and my style are totally different, you know. That's not the issue. The issue is modesty. You know, let her wear whatever she thinks is cool and awesome. And like I said, she's cooler than I am, you know, but as long as she's modest. So does that make sense? You know, when my kids were teenagers, I used to have a kind of a mental checklist when they came down and wanted to go to school in an outfit. The first mental checklist was, is it a sin? You know, if they passed that one, then I would go to, will they get arrested if they wear this, you know? And then I went to, will someone someday still talk to them and be their friend if they wear this to school? If it passed that little mental checklist for me, fine, wear it, okay? And it wasn't against school rules, wear it. Then you're just expressing yourself. You know, the last thing is, you know, don't make this a battleground with your daughters, especially. You know, I'm always amazed when I would take my teen girls shopping and we'd be in the dressing room trying something on. And a lot of times there was a mom and a daughter in the next dressing room, and they'd be arguing, you know. No, Mom, I love this bikini. Well, that bikini doesn't, I don't think that bikini is right for you. I think it's too small for you. But I love it, Mom, I love it. And again, like Michael said, whose credit card is that bikini going to go on, you know? I don't think the 13-year-old girl is paying for that. So set your limits and stick to them. Now your kids may be able, your girls may be able to wear something on vacation at the beach with the family that they won't be able to wear at church. That's okay, all right? Those kind of things are okay. But don't make this a battleground. Just stick give your standards to your kids and then stick with it.
Now let's talk about helping your kid choose friends, your teen choose appropriate friends, and talk about dating rules as well, dating rules. When your kids are little, you have a lot of say over who becomes their best friends, right? You have a lot of, because you control the car, you have the ability to influence who they go to and who they see. That gets less and less in middle school, and then in high school, you have a lot less authority or influence over who they choose as friends. So you have to help them choose kids that have the same standards that you want them to have. So encourage those friendships. Now you can talk to them about how bad behavior corrupts good character. Did I say that right? Bad influence corrupts good character. So you help them see, look, is this really the kind of kid you want to hang around? What are they going to induce you to do? How are they going to influence you for good or for bad? Now, in return, you make every effort to help your kids be in the path of kids you want them to be in that set good examples. Now, this can be inconvenient, and it can even be expensive. I want to use as the example our son. When our son was in high school, he was the only disciple in his school. He was the only Christian in his school. He had been on the wrestling team. Even when he was an accepted member of the wrestling team, they used to deride him for his Christian convictions about not having sex, not doing drugs, not getting into porn. Did we want him to languish in that environment? No, but we weren't going to move to another house or another neighborhood, so this is what we did. He grew up with kids. We live in Athens, which is about an hour and a half east of Atlanta, depending on what kind of area of Atlanta we're talking about. He had grown up with children at our church's camp, the Swamp, some of you have heard of, which is a great regional church camp that was founded by Sonny and Carolyn Sessions. So he grew up with these buddies in the Swamp. Those are the kids we wanted him to be around. They lived in Atlanta, an hour to an hour and a half away. So when our son was in high school, when he was old enough to drive, we bought him a junker car, and every weekend we would pack him off, his little self, off to one of these buddies' houses because he could be close to kids that had. Now, you might accuse us of being neglectful as parents because we got rid of our son every weekend. But here was the goal. We wanted him to be around other boys that would encourage him in his spiritual goals. If it meant sending him to another town, that was fine. We were willing to do that. It was inconvenient, it was expensive, but it was well worth it. And you know the funny thing? He's still best friends with all those guys. They've been to each other's weddings. They were in each other's weddings. They're watching each other's kids being born now. They are lifelong friends. So whatever it took to cement that relationship, that's what we did, and it was well worth it. Now, let's talk about dating. As an elder, I'm often asked, Mary and I often get asked, what's the church's stand on dating? And I have to confess that bothers us a little when we're asked that, because the fact is it's not the church's job to take a stand on dating. That's your responsibility. You come up with the rules for dating. Now think about it. Even if you weren't a disciple, even if you weren't involved with church, you'd still make rules about dating for your kids, right? I don't know what they'd be, but you'd still make rules. So that's up to the parent to make rules about dating. Let me just tell you, if it would be helpful to tell you what we did. The goal was this. We have to protect our kids from this pervasive culture of early sexual activity. In fact, before telling you what we did, I want to show you this statistic. This is from the Journal of School Health, an author named Christine Markham. She found that 12% of school children engaged in intercourse by age 12. 12% by age 12. 13% had experienced oral or anal sex by age 12. By age 12. That is frightening. So this is what we want to discourage. So these are the rules we came up with. Now you set your own rules based on your convictions and prayer and getting advice and your culture, all right? So we're talking to international students. But we talk with our kids a lot about how dating is age inappropriate. Age inappropriate. Now Mary's dad, this old-fashioned World War II guy from East Tennessee, he used to tell, Mary's one of 3 kids, all of whom are girls. So this strict World War II East Tennessee guy told his daughters, dating is shopping for marriage. You're testing marriage, right? You're shopping for marriage. So we would invoke that, and we'd say, you know, you're shopping for marriage. Do you think that's not a trivial thing? Do you want to date, you know, what's the purpose of dating? Are you dating just to be able to say I dated somebody? No. Dating is a more serious thing. So the main thing we wanted to teach them was to make good friends, not to date. Now, we did allow them to go to school dances. Fortunately, now this was after seeking advice. You know, when our kids were little, and kids really don't understand what dating means, I'll have 9-year-olds come into my office and say, I've got me a girlfriend. And I say, oh, you do? He says, yeah, we're dating. And I say, interesting. For a 9-year-old, what does that mean? Are you betrothed to her? Did you buy her a ring yet? What? Did you pick her up in your car every day and take her to work, you know, where she goes? I mean, they have no clue what dating is. It's just a thing. So we flesh that one out a little bit. So we even have to do that with teenagers. So they really don't understand what dating is. When our kids were little, every once in a while, like Amanda, our eldest, she decided in middle school maybe that she liked this other boy in church and wanted to go on a date. So we let them do that. Under supervised conditions, they went to a movie where the boy's parents, in collusion with us, sat like 3 rows back and kept their eagle eye on both of them and saw them hold hands. That's as far as it went. And we were okay with that. Now, when they got to high school age and they're asking about dances, we let them go. Fortunately, they decided by that time they had enough convictions to decide school dances were kind of stupid. So what they did was they brought other disciples to the school dances. That was their dates. Not their date, you know what I mean? Not this dating relationship thing. It's just a fun date. Now, what it did for the kids, this is interesting. They always took someone from church, and all of them were disciples in high school. All of our 3 kids were disciples by the time they got to high school. They would find, like our youngest, Emily, she got this guy from church, this older, swarthy, really handsome guy, looks like right out of a GQ poster. Really good friends. They had always been really good friends. We're good friends with his family. Emily had the strategic acumen to think, I'm going to invite this guy to go with me, and he was happy to do so. So Emily walks into her senior prom, and on her arm is this studly, handsome, looks like he was, her stock value went up substantially on that day. It wasn't a dating thing. It wasn't a forever relationship thing. They went as friends, and she managed to make everyone else in the school jealous of her. So we were like, yes, that's what we're talking about. That's what, and we talked to them a lot about why you don't want to be yoked with non-believers, right? Because this is what they're going to induce you to do. The kids finally developed their own convictions that dating in high school never seems to work out well. They'd had enough experience seeing their friends go through that they just came to that conviction on their own. And I've heard other families that have raised Christian kids say the same thing, that have said they were sorry they let their kids go to allow their kids to have a dating relationship in high school. Usually they regretted it. So that's just something to think about. Again, don't be afraid to protect your child. If you think a child is too immature or is choosing the wrong kind of person to get involved with, you don't allow it. They still live under your roof, and God put you in charge for a reason. And you will have to answer to God about how you raise that child. So we're just being very, I hate to sound patriarchal, but we're have deep convictions about dating, dating in high school, dating, real the way kids look at it. Now, last thing, and then we're going to have a little break and a little Q&A. Who here wants their teens to become disciples someday? Their kids, everybody, right? Every Christian. That's the goal. That's what we pour out our lives to do, is to help our kids become disciples. We want them to have eternal life. We want them to have a relationship with God. We want them to have the moral compass of the Bible so it will go well for them for the rest of their lives. Now, the problem is, as a movement, we used to imply that if you just did all these things, if you went to enough married retreats, you went to enough parenting retreats, and you did all these things, just the way Mike and Mary just told you to do, you would have a guaranteed disciple when they become teens. However, we've seen it countless times. You've seen it countless times. Good, solid, disciple parents who raise kids in the best way they know how, and the kid decides to follow the world instead of God. So we've all seen this. Why does that happen? And what invariably happens is, when that happens, the parents, what do they feel? Guilty. It's their fault. They anguish about what they did or didn't do. Here's the thing. Whether we like it or not, the choice to follow God ends up being between your child and God. Okay? We can't force a child to follow God. No matter how hard we try, we can't force it, and we can't make it happen, because God gave kids the gift of free will. God went through this. God went through this very same experience. So I'm showing you Isaiah 1. Yes, Isaiah 1 verse 2, where God says, "Hear, O heavens, listen, O earth, for the Lord has spoken. I reared children and brought them up, but they've rebelled against me." God went through it. So what makes you think you can automatically make this happen and be a better parent than God? It's because kids have free will. Ultimately, the decision to follow the world or to follow God is up to them. Now, the whole Old Testament is a story of God's love for his children despite their repeated rebellion, despite their repeated apostasy. He continued to maintain a relationship with them. He never broke a promise to them. And he always said, when it's time, when you're ready to turn back to me, I'll be there and I'll love you. But he also allowed them to suffer the consequences of their disobedience. Tough love, right? Which is something we can do to follow the example of God. Now, what do you do? So what do you do if all this you've done, you've upheld all these things we've talked about, and your child still decides to follow the world? And these will be our last points. 1, do what God did. Maintain a relationship with that child. You have to let them know that it's your choices I don't approve of. Not you. You're my child. I love you. I raised you under the tutelage of the Lord to have a good life. That's how much I love you. You let them know that you still love them, and you don't make your love contingent on them becoming disciples. If you do, you're a hypocrite. You become a hypocrite. So you don't make your love contingent on them becoming disciples. That's their free will. Number 2, you in your home maintain biblical standards in your home. You make it clear. You follow the world. I can't stop you, but I'm not going to compromise my convictions. If you do, you become a hypocrite. If you do, that child is going to say, well, Mom and Dad, you never really meant what you said. As soon as I'm out of the house, you lapse into this. See, just like I said, all Christians are hypocrites. They'll use that against you. So you must maintain the biblical standards in your home. Make it clear you're not going to change those standards depending on their decision. So if a child decides to have a premarital relationship with somebody, even if it's a positive relationship, but they're not married, and they come to your house for Christmas and ask to sleep in the same room, you say, I'm sorry. My biblical standards will not permit that under my roof. I'd be happy to pay, well, no, I wouldn't be happy to pay for a hotel, but we'd be happy to give you the name of a hotel that you can pay for to go stay in, or find one of your friends or something like that. We can't stop you from doing that, but we will maintain biblical standards in our home. And you have to let them know you're going to stick to your guns. And if the child is not yet independent, you have to let them know what you will and won't permit under your roof. We won't permit illicit things to happen under our roof or illegal things. Even with the kids of disciples, our threshold for when do you no longer permit a kid to live in your home and you do tough love is if they're illicit things, if they're illegal things, because you could get in trouble for that. If there's drug dealing or theft or something like that going out under your roof, you could be liable for that. So it's at that point we encourage, okay, we're not going to kick you out on the street. We're going to find you another living arrangement if the law doesn't do that first and send you off to boot camp. But we're sticking to your guns. You're not compromising your convictions about the Bible. In fact, you're going to inspire them by sticking to your guns. We've seen parents, in trying to win their children back to the Lord, they compromise their own convictions. They compromise what they believe is necessary for salvation and so forth. We can't love our children so much that we waver in our own faith. You see what I'm saying? You inspire kids with the strength of your own convictions. Now, I've seen this happen many times where a wonderful disciple family has a rebellious teen. That teen decides to follow the world, leaves the home, says, I don't want, Mom and Dad, I want nothing to do with you for the rest of my life. Sometimes it's a year, sometimes it's 5 years, sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 20. When they hear from that child again, either as the prodigal son, they come back, or even if they set up their own lives, and I've heard it many times where they call their parents and they say, you know, what inspired me, you know, I never told you this when I was a teen, but the way you adhered to your convictions was inspiring. And sometimes that's what influenced kids to come back after 5, 10, 20 years and maybe even become disciples later on. We've actually seen that happen. Maybe it won't even happen in your generation. Maybe. So what I'm saying is the word you have tried to plant with all your might as parents won't come back void. Maybe not in this generation, maybe in that kid's generation. You know, Timothy, Paul talks about Timothy's grandmother, how Timothy's grandmother influenced him. Maybe your position, it didn't work with my kids, but with my kids' kids. That's who I can influence to the faith. So I'm encouraging you because I believe God wants you to retain your convictions about the Bible no matter what your child does. You don't compromise your convictions to lure the child back to the body of Christ. I'm going to close with a scripture, Matthew 10:21-22. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child. Children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. All men will hate you because of me, but he who stands firm to the end will be saved. I don't want to end this course on a downer. What I want you to know is the Bible never guarantees that just because we're disciples, we'll have complete family unity. What we've talked about today will greatly increase the likelihood that you're going to have unity in the body of Christ in your family, but it warns us of just the opposite may have. We all need to remember the verses we studied in Luke 14 when we counted the cost of becoming a Christian, right? To continue to love Jesus even more than we love our own families. Remember counting the cost with that scripture. So it's painful, but it's a pain God went through when his children rebelled. And we may not see the outcome of our kids' lives. We may not live that long, but surely the word we've tried to plant by doing all these things won't come back void. Now, I'm once again sorry to end on a bummer, but we're going to take a little bit of a break, and then we can have some questions and answers. Okay? Thank you. Oops. 5-minute break.